Hi, this is Terry Erasmus from Bonsai Tree in South Africa. Today I'm going to be dealing with Juniper grafting, scion type grafting, and I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently today to what I normally do it. This is really just an introduction and a welcome to the video, and then I'm going to jump over into the actual work that was done, in fact, some months ago. And that'll show, I'm going to be walking you through the steps of doing the actual scion grafting, and then I'm going to switch back to the current time or today, and then showing you whether I was successful with my grafting or not, or how successful or how unsuccessful I was. And so I hope that you will enjoy today's video. Thank you. Grafting is something that quite a lot of people are a little bit nervous of doing, but it is a very useful technique for improving your junipers, particularly when they have become, or when you start finding that you have leggy growth, so old branches that have become leggy, in other words, growth only at the tips of the branches. And you need to restart those branches so that you can get ramification closer onto the trunk. The best time to do grafting on junipers is at the beginning of the growing season, when you actually see that you start, or just before you start seeing development of the tips or greening up of the tips of the foliage. Grafting is one of those things that just requires practice. Without further ado, let me take you into the workshop, and we'll start, and we'll just firstly go through the various tools or various bits and pieces that you will need, and I'll discuss the tree that I'm going to be grafting, and then we'll quickly go through the steps of grafting. This is the tree that I'm going to be grafting on. It is an Itoyagawa juniper, which I in fact imported from Japan a number of years ago and sold it to a customer. Unfortunately, this customer got very sick, ended up in hospital, and was unable to take care of her trees. And during that time, this particular tree was either overwatered or underwatered, but a lot of the canopy died, unfortunately. So I removed all of the dead growth. I potted the tree, repotted it into pure pumice. It's been in this mix or in this medium for a couple of years now, just to regain its vigor. And as you can see, the runners are developing quite nicely. And so this is a prime example of a tree that, or a prime subject for grafting. You can see these very leggy branches. There's very little chance that anything is going to bud back at this point, so the only solution is going to be to graft. And then we can also put a few scions or grafts into other areas where there are no branches, and increase the structure of the tree, more branches that we can create a canopy with. You don't need too much in the way of materials to do grafting. The most important thing is to use a grafting knife, which needs to be extremely sharp. Alternatively, you can use any kind of anti-cutter or blade. If you do use a grafting knife, it's important that you're going to need to know how to sharpen it very well, because it needs to be exceptionally sharp. So for some people, it's actually easier just to use a blade and then just replace the blade as it bluntens. The next most important thing that you're going to need is parafilm, also known as buddy tape. Buddy tape is the Japanese product, and parafilm is a US produced product. And it is one of the key, well, there's many advantages or good characteristics about parafilm that makes it ideal for grafting. It's breathable, it's stretchable, and so it's a great, I would definitely recommend that as an alternative to the bag method of doing grafting, which is a lot more, it's a little bit trickier to ensure that the scions actually don't cook in those bags, particularly in the African sun. And then the other thing that you're going to need is just standard plastrip grafting tape. It's not stretchable, so you don't have to use grafting tape. You can use anything. We're just going to use this to tie the scion, secure it onto the understock. And then also very importantly is a good sealer. And this is just going to be used to prevent water from getting into the graft. So the first thing that we're going to do is cut our understock. And you want to use very healthy material and something that's not too thin. The next thing to do is to prepare your scion. So you're just going to clean this growth towards the end of the scion off, and also removing the tip, the runner. And you don't want to, you need to keep enough foliage for the graft to feed itself, but you don't also want to stress it. So probably about that much. And I've left this fairly long, this portion, and we're going to reduce that by when we make our cuts. You might find it easier to, in fact, pre-stretch the parafilm before you apply it to the scion. It just makes it easier. You're less likely to wrap the scion too tightly. So taking your prepared scion, you're going to wrap the parafilm around the stem and then start wrapping the foliage. You don't want to do it too tight, but it needs to be tight enough so that water doesn't get in. It also needs to overlap slightly for the same reason, but you don't want to overlap it. You don't want to be wrapping multiple times over the same point. And then you just end off with a little bit of a tail. You can just cut off any excess, and that is your prepared scion. Finished preparing the scions. We've got 5 different ones, so I'm gonna we hope for 100% success, but we'll see how it goes. The next step is going to be to make your cuts. So there are 2 cuts. You need to make a long cut and a short cut. And this bottom cut is where you need to make contact with the phloem of the understock. So we can cut that a bit shorter. Once cut, you don't want to touch and potentially contaminate the cut tip. And now we're going to make the cut into the understock and join them. And we need to tie that off with a little grafting tape. Not too tight, neither too loose. I'm just going to seal it with a sealer so that moisture can't get in. And that's the first graft completed. I'm using a small rubber pad just to protect the scion, and then you want to make one deliberate action with your cut, and if you're not happy with it, you can just cut it again. It needs to be fairly long, the first cut, because that is what is going to make contact with your understock. And then you're going to make a sharper cut, in other words, a higher greater angle on the other end, on the other side. And this is now going to be placed into your next grafting position. I have finished the grafting on this juniper now, and the tree will now go outside and will be looked after just like any other tree, or as it would normally be looked after. And in probably a few months, hopefully within 6 months, we will be able to see whether the grafts have taken or not, and I hope to update you at that point. The grafting that you saw me perform there was done in September, the beginning of September in 2021. It is now 7 months later, and now I can clearly see which grafts have taken and which ones have failed. So I'm going to be sharing this information with you, and I'm doing this for a very good reason. Firstly, because I want to share with you what I think was the cause of the failures, and then where I was successful, why I believe they were a success. Because I think that whenever we what I'm trying to stress here, or trying to stress, is that when you are performing different techniques on your bonsai trees, there aren't always clearly defined time frames and rules, so to speak, which will lead to success. You are dealing with so many different variables when you're working on your trees. No two trees are going to be identical in terms of their health, in terms of their stage of development, and so you need to treat your trees as individuals, and also you need to learn from your experiences. Every experience that you have with a tree or interaction should be a learning experience for you, which should lead to you doing better the next time, whether it be getting better growth, better response, more buds, and in this case, having a higher success rate with grafting. But without further ado, let me show you what I got right. So I'm very happy to say that probably the most important graft was this one, and this one was successful. So I'm very proud to show you that I now have a first branch or the future beginnings of a first branch. And as you can see here, the growth of the scion or the graft has actually now pushed and broken through the parafilm, which just demonstrates how wonderful it is to work with this as a tape, as a means to help or assist you in your grafting. So it actually started a couple of months, maybe a month, 2 months ago, that you could clearly see it was breaking from that. And so now we can actually remove the rest of this parafilm, and the scion can grow. And we obviously won't wire it or anything at the moment. It's still a little bit tender. I will now show you where the joint is and show you what that looks like. So you can see the graft is taken on a very wide area. Sometimes you'll get a graft and it'll just fuse at a very small point, and then it's actually better just to abort that and redo the graft. But this is fused very nicely, and you can see it's actually started to callus and to fuse across. So this is great. I'm so excited about this one, and obviously now we will just allow this graft, this portion of growth, to develop. And then in the future, maybe in, say, in a year, 2 years or so, depending on how it develops, we can start applying some wire onto it. But most importantly, the objective has been achieved, which was to get growth further back on this branch, because as you might recall from seeing the earlier footage, it was extremely leggy and had little chance, if not zero chance, of anything breaking out in this area. So it was vital that something be grafted here to ensure the future of this tree. And I'm very happy to say that that was successful. And here we have a second graft, which is also successful. Not as vigorous as the first one, so I would assume that the contact between the tissue, the living tissue, was not as good, but it also could be because I can see that water was able to get into the parafilm, and I think some of the foliage has rotted as a result. So perhaps if I just remove the parafilm and allow it to develop, it will possibly just throw off that the dead foliage and become a bit healthier. So again, successful graft, and great because it was in an area on this branch, which is the second branch. It is towards the front of the tree. The branches that were that I started off with only were developing towards the back and were very heavy. So this graft is quite important because it'll mean that I could potentially remove these this back portion in time when this graft is strong enough, and then I can start with a much thinner branch to build the ramification on the tree in this area. In total, I performed 7 grafts on this tree, and I've just shown you the 2 that were successful. That means I failed at 5, which is not a great result, but I wanted to share it with you because and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I mean to show you that everybody makes mistakes in our trees, in the techniques that we're doing. And sometimes the factors are environmental or other, and sometimes it's just through lack of experience. And so I will chalk this one up to the lack of experience. I haven't done many grafts, but I want to show you that you can start out with grafting even if you've never done it before, and you can start, and even if your success is 1 or 2 grafts like I just did or showed you, you can see that as a learning curve, and it's in a positive light, it's two opportunities that you have now to improve your tree. So I think that's definitely a positive and something to work on. But now let's take a look at some of the grafts that failed and why I think they may have failed. So let's look at this first one. This graft was also on the first branch and it was coming towards the front. So I spaced it apart from the first one, which is the first successful graft that I showed you. But you'll see that it didn't take, and I suspect that the reason it didn't take is because the material was simply too thin. So when the material is very small, to align the live tissue or the phloem is extremely difficult. And I just don't obviously have that level of experience yet or accuracy. And so I believe that that is the single reason why this graft failed. As you can see, yeah, it's probably the thickness of maybe 2 millimeters in diameter or across on the scion, and that was simply just too small. But I do believe that there are people that are skilled enough to do that. I'm just not one of those people. This graft, yeah, which is actually on the trunk, it's running up the trunk of the tree. A little bit disappointed that this one didn't take, but also at the same time not too terribly surprised. I don't think I did a great job of actually inserting it, and I think it was just sort of clinging in there. So again, the importance of getting the tissue to align is of paramount importance for the success of your scion grafting. I believe the reason for this graft's failure is that I didn't cut deep enough into the trunk, into the understock, and so there wasn't enough area of the living tissue, the phloem, that was in contact, and that's the reason for this failure. I've left this failed graft intact here because I just wanted to show you. You can see how I made the cut into the branch and how thin this graft actually was, the scion, which again was about 2 millimeters thick, and it's completely loose in there. So you can see there was absolutely no, even the beginnings of fusing to one another. So again, I think the problem here was that the scion was too small. Next time to use a thicker material. I kept this scion aside because actually if you look quite closely, it did start to fuse at one stage. But then I believe what caused it to fail was that the wrapping wasn't done properly, and water was able to get in there and was able to rot the foliage, which really inevitably spelt the doom for this scion. So again, I should practice more caution when wrapping the foliage to ensure that no water can get in. So that's just perhaps being a little bit more cautious, and also maybe just overlapping the tape a little bit more to ensure that there's better water resistance. I will do another round of grafting in spring again. I think my success will be better than it was this time, as I've learned from this experience. So I hope that you have learned something, can take it away and maybe perhaps try some grafting on your own trees and be a little bit more confident about it now that you've seen me demonstrate the techniques. And it's really not difficult. It's really just about practice, I believe. And if you're looking for the materials, of course, at my store, my online store, bonsaitree.co.za, you will find grafting supplies and, of course, much more. So if you haven't subscribed yet to my YouTube channel, I hope you will. And please do feel free to share the link and share to the video with your friends, your bonsai club, or whoever that you think might enjoy watching it and learn from it as well. So thanks very much for your time, and until next time, thank you. Goodbye.